General Alfred Jodl famously characterized George Patton as the American Guderian. A commander known for his audacity, Patton favored expansive maneuvers, embracing substantial risks to achieve monumental victories. However, perceptions of Allied leadership within the German officer corps were far from uniform. These views ranged widely, from begrudging admiration to outright contempt, often shaped by direct battlefield experiences and prevailing ideological biases. Such divergent perceptions offer a compelling glimpse into the strategic mindset of Germany's military elite. Through an examination of their perspectives, we can gain profound insights into the strategic calculus that defined the Second World War. This analysis will explore how German generals assessed their Allied counterparts and how those assessments evolved with the changing tides of the conflict. Of all the Allied commanders, one figure in particular captured the attention of the German High Command. An officer so aggressive and so relentless in his pursuit of victory that he compelled a certain reluctant admiration from his adversaries, General George S. Patton. This famously flamboyant American general was perceived by numerous German officers as a reflection of their own martial ethos. Indeed, some went so far as to label him the most German of all Allied commanders. But what precisely did this characterization imply? Patton's approach to warfare resonated deeply with German military doctrine. He championed a philosophy of ceaseless movement, swift advances, and the application of overwhelming force. This particular style of combat was strikingly familiar to the German generals, a clear echo of their own blitzkrieg methodology. Patton's profound aversion to static warfare was in fact legendary. On one occasion, he famously made a statement by relieving himself in a protective slit trench, declaring, "There now, try to use it." This palpable disdain for fixed defensive positions resonated strongly with German commanders, for whom mobility was the paramount tactical virtue. Heinz Guderian, the principal architect of Germany's blitzkrieg strategy, expressed a clear admiration for Patton's tactical acumen. He stated, "I hear much about General Patton, and he conducted a fine campaign from the standpoint of a panzer specialist. I must congratulate him on his victory, since he acted as I would have done had I been in his position." Yet, it was not merely Guderian who esteemed Patton's abilities. General Gunther Blumentritt, a key planner in the invasions of both France and Poland, once described Patton as the most aggressive armored general among the Allies. He further noted, "His operations impressed us enormously, likely because he came closest to our own concept of mobile warfare, a classical military commander." However, the German perception of Patton was not universally positive. Certain commanders regarded him more as a tactical virtuoso than a strategic visionary. Their attention, for matters of grand strategy, was focused on figures such as Montgomery and Eisenhower. Interestingly, Patton's command style also drew distinct parallels with the German doctrine of Auftragstaktik, or mission-type tactics. This approach prioritized the issuance of broad directives, thereby empowering subordinate commanders to exercise their own initiative on the battlefield. As Patton himself once articulated, "Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity." Yet, notwithstanding this admiration, there was also considerable criticism. Some German officers contended that Patton's rapid advance through Sicily was driven more by a desire for personal glory than by strategic necessity. Military historian Harry Yady even characterized Patton's rush to Messina as a demonstration of empty glory. It is crucial to note that the Germans possessed a tradition of rigorous evaluation. They were not easily impressed by a singular campaign, regardless of its success, given their own deep cadre of experienced armored commanders. Patton's reputation, while certainly notable, was not as preeminent in their assessment as one might presume. In fact, some German military historians have observed that Patton's logistical achievements, while impressive, were often eclipsed by the sheer magnitude of resources available to the Allied forces. This fostered a perception that Allied victories stemmed more from material superiority than from individual command prowess. Thus, while Patton was respected for his aggressive tactics and mobility-centric strategy, the German appraisal of him remained complex and highly nuanced. They perceived in him a reflection of their own military philosophy, yet also a clear beneficiary of America's immense industrial power. This very paradox, a German-style general in an American uniform, made Patton a deeply fascinating figure to his adversaries, one they both admired and sought to fully comprehend. While Patton's aggressive battlefield conduct earned him respect among German commanders, their perspective on British military leadership was markedly different. One might assume the Germans viewed their British adversaries as a lesser force, but the reality was substantially more intricate. In truth, German generals maintained a surprising degree of respect for British forces, particularly in regard to their resilience, and, in a testament to their professionalism, General Siegfried Westphal, a senior German officer, once remarked that the most formidable in attack and the most tenacious in defense were the British divisions. This was far from mere flattery. German military assessments repeatedly emphasized the consistent quality of British personnel and their remarkable reliability in pivotal engagements. Evidently, the German High Command perceived a unique quality within the British fighting spirit. Yet, despite this professional admiration for the common soldier, German commanders frequently criticized British leadership as being excessively cautious. In the dynamic environment of mechanized warfare, such hesitation could prove fatal. General Erwin Rommel, the renowned Desert Fox, succinctly expressed this frustration when he famously told captured British officers, following the fall of Tobruk, "Gentlemen, you have fought like lions, only to be led by donkeys." However, no examination of German perspectives on the British is complete without considering the far more complex viewpoint of Adolf Hitler himself. His attitude toward Britain was deeply ambivalent. In Hitler's strategic worldview, the British were potential, even natural, allies for Germany. He perceived them as a kindred Germanic people, a group he ideologically believed should be aligned with Germany, not in opposition. So, how did he rationalize their conflict? Hitler's paranoid ideology supplied a simple answer: that Jewish influence was manipulating the British, inciting them against Germany. This conspiratorial worldview allowed Hitler to rationalize his war against Britain, while simultaneously maintaining a perverse form of respect for the British people, a duality that directly influenced German military strategy. This respect for British resilience meant that German commanders typically prepared for arduous, protracted engagements when confronting British forces. They anticipated that even with an initial advantage, their opponents were likely to entrench and offer stiff resistance. Concurrently, the perception of timid British leadership encouraged a different set of tactical considerations. German commanders were sometimes emboldened to take calculated risks, gambling that their British counterparts would be slow to react. While this aggressive approach occasionally yielded success, it also carried the potential to backfire spectacularly when British forces proved more adept and resolute than anticipated. One domain where German respect for British capabilities was especially pronounced was in aerial warfare. Hermann Göring, the commander of the Luftwaffe, was forced to grudgingly acknowledge British technological prowess, stating that it fills me with rage when I see the Mosquito. The British have managed to craft a magnificent wooden aircraft and endowed it with a speed which they have, yet again, managed to increase. This begrudging admiration for British engineering and ingenuity directly influenced German aircraft development for the remainder of the war. Ultimately, the German perspective on British forces was a complex mixture of respect, profound frustration, and reluctant admiration. They perceived their adversaries as formidable and highly professional, yet occasionally hampered by an overly cautious leadership. This multifaceted view profoundly shaped German strategy and tactics throughout the entirety of the conflict, often with consequences that significantly altered the course of the war. While German assessments of the British and American forces were indeed complex, their perception of the Soviet military was destined to undergo a dramatic and fundamental transformation. Indeed, the German perception of Soviet forces fluctuated significantly throughout the duration of the war. In the initial stages, a prevailing sentiment among the Germans was to severely underestimate the capabilities of the Soviets, whom they regarded as a less competent adversary at the outset of Operation Barbarossa. A significant portion of the German High Command considered the Soviet Union to be a straightforward target. Their assessment painted the Red Army as poorly equipped, incompetently led, and utterly incapable of withstanding the Wehrmacht's superior tactics and technological prowess. This view was reinforced by Nazi racial theories, which depicted the Slavic peoples as Untermenschen, a derogatory term meaning subhuman. This dehumanizing ideology led many German officers to the firm belief that Soviet soldiers would simply disintegrate in the face of German military might. However, as the conflict progressed and the Soviet military demonstrated unforeseen resilience and strategic ingenuity, this initial perception shifted dramatically. The German perspective on Soviet forces underwent a stark evolution, moving from outright dismissal to a state of genuine fear. As the war wore on, German forces began to encounter an unexpectedly ferocious level of resistance. While the Red Army may have been caught unprepared at the outset, they swiftly demonstrated both their resilience and unwavering determination. This stalwart defense compelled German commanders to fundamentally reassess their preconceived notions. Field Marshal Paul Ludwig Ewald von Kleist, reflecting on this profound shift in perception, later stated, "From the very beginning, the Russians demonstrated they were first-class warriors. Our success during the initial months of the war can be attributed to our superior training." However, having gained combat experience, the Russians evolved into first-class soldiers, fighting with an exceptional degree of perseverance and possessing astounding endurance. This newfound, albeit grudging, respect for the resolve of the Soviet military intensified as the conflict became increasingly protracted. The Battle of Stalingrad represented a pivotal juncture, not merely in the war's trajectory, but fundamentally in the German assessment of their Soviet adversary. The Red Army's capacity to encircle and annihilate an entire German army irrevocably shattered the prevailing notion of Soviet military inferiority. As Soviet counteroffensives gathered pace, German commanders were confronted by an adversary that was not only vast in number, but also progressively more tactically proficient and formidably equipped. A palpable sense of dread began to permeate the German ranks as the realization dawned that they were no longer confronting a lesser foe, but a juggernaut that was becoming inexorably more powerful with each passing day. Franz Halder, a German general and chief of the Army High Command, noted of the Soviet Army, quote, "It appears the enemy, on the initiative of their new command, and perhaps also under the influence of England, is making every effort to hold the front line and prevent us from advancing further eastward. Russian troops are fighting, as they have before, with the utmost tenacity and severity." Unquote. This evolution in German assessment carried profound strategic implications. The initial confidence that defined the early phases of Operation Barbarossa was gradually supplanted by a far more cautious strategic approach. German commanders were now compelled to reckon with an adversary they genuinely feared, one capable of equaling and ultimately surpassing their own military prowess. It must be emphasized, however, that this perceptual shift was neither universal nor instantaneous. Certain German officers adhered rigidly to their ideological preconceptions for longer than their counterparts. Nevertheless, by the time Soviet forces were advancing on Berlin, even the most fervent proponents of National Socialist racial doctrines were forced to confront the undeniable reality of Soviet military might. Contrary to common assumption, these German perspectives on the Allied forces did not simply vanish in the post-war era. Instead, they have persisted, continuing to shape contemporary military doctrine. The analyses provided by German generals concerning their wartime opponents offer critical lessons that retain their relevance in the modern era. For example, the German respect for British resilience has informed the modern military's emphasis on prioritizing troop morale and operational endurance. In a similar vein, the historical concerns over Soviet numerical superiority have compelled NATO to invest significantly in achieving technological overmatch. Furthermore, the demonstrated effectiveness of Patton's audacious tactics has left an indelible mark on the doctrines of mechanized warfare. Thank you for joining us here at Warfare Doctrine for this historical analysis. We trust this exploration has proven informative. If you wish to delve deeper into related subjects, we invite you to view our examination of the 5 most underrated German generals of the Second World War. This feature offers a compelling look into the lives and strategic careers of some of the conflict's most adept, yet frequently neglected, military leaders. We encourage you to show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and activating notifications to remain informed of our future content regarding the Second World War. We look forward to presenting our next analysis.